Welcome everyone to the first edition of Unravel Your Mind. It's all about transforming relationships to love and life and breaking through beliefs to tap into our inner wisdom. So on today's call, we're going to have probably some people join us on chat, and we also have some live individuals on the lines. Let's open it up to see if there's any questions about the book or angels, herpes, and psychedelics, maybe some storylines that popped out for you that you thought, I wonder about this, or would you clarify that? And of course, if there's any questions from your own life or just something that you feel like you want a roundtable, you can bring that up too. So anything having to do with relationships to love and life, it's all fair game. So does anyone want to jump in? I do see some chats coming in, so there's some questions, but anyone that's live on the line want to ask a question?
Well, one of the questions that I had was when I was reading your story about your relationship with the gentleman Klaus and his son. It became really clear that obviously you two didn't stay together, thank goodness, but whatever happened to his kid?
You know, that's a really good question. And I have to tell you that I just finished recording the audiobook, and there's only 3 times that I cried during the recording. And one of the times, and I have to say it was a little bit unexpected, was when I started talking about Peter. It just was like tears just burst out of my eyes unexpectedly. And I think that's because I don't know. I don't know what happened to his son. And that's a bit of a difficult situation for me because, as you know from reading the book, yeah, I really had a close connection with him and really wanted to be a part of his life. And it was a big reason why it was especially hard for me to leave that very toxic relationship. So a very tough question to answer because I actually cannot tell you what happened to him in the end. And I have no contact whatsoever with him or his mother, or Klaus. So yeah, so that's a bit of a tough one to answer.
Yeah, because at one point, I think in the book, you also, if I'm remembering correctly, didn't she connect with you at one point?
She did, actually. I had been in connection with her when I lived in India with Peter and Klaus, because I really felt that need to be that conduit for the child and the mother, and casual small things. And then it wasn't until I left that she did reach out to me again and wanted to have more of a conversation, not just a little note here and there. And that was also a difficult time because I really wanted to share with her exactly what I saw and what was happening. And yet in the very beginning, when she reached out right after I had left India and was in Singapore, I gave an honest answer, but it was a more of a vague answer. I think at that time I was also just trying to find a way to disconnect myself from the situation. And then she wrote me again when I was back in America visiting friends, actually while I was sitting with my friend Jessica, and wanted to know what was really happening there. And it was a very heartfelt moment, actually, because Jessica, being a mom herself, and I just happened to look at my email while I was sitting with her and read this, and she knew obviously the depths of my despair with what was happening with Klaus, and not wanting to be in touch and not wanting to give him another reason to come after me or to be involved in that. And she just looked at me and said, I really would like for you to reach out to her and share with her, coming from a mother, how important this is. And while I knew that, it was the nudge that I needed to just say, yeah, I'm gonna put this little guy's safety above my fear of Klaus. And that is oftentimes what happens in these types of relationships, is that it's the fear that holds us in place in situations that, our logical mind can say, well, that, just get out, just leave, just this, just that. But when you're emotionally entangled and karmically entangled with people, that it's really hard sometimes to break through that fear. And so, yeah, I did reach out to her, and I haven't heard from her since. So I hope that she was able to, continue to have him in her life and perhaps get him back full time. And that my intention would be, and my hope would be that he's living a good life, I hope.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that question though, because it is a tough one. And I think a lot of times we do stay in relationships because of, lots of different people that are in the relationships with us. And so it is one of the things that can hold us back, and it pulls on our heartstrings. So that's a great question.
Yeah, because it was also brave to even tell the mother anything because of how toxic Klaus was. So I thought,
Yeah.
like, wow, she's telling her the truth. That could be a little scary, but
Yeah, and you also just don't want it to be used against you. When you're trying to break free and break away, it can be really hard to think that you're giving that person a lifeline back to you. And at that point, I was truly done cutting the cords and wanting to break away from that energy. So yeah, it was a pretty challenging time, actually.
yeah, thanks. Yeah, I could feel that.
Yeah.
Mm.
Any other questions that come up? You can also check the chat here. So I have a question that's coming up on the chat from Thailand, actually. How does one know when in a relationship whether to keep pushing through, peeling back the layers of the onion, so to speak, and when to let go and move on? So this is a great one. And of course, speaking to someone who likes to hang on to these relationships and get all the lessons, I do have something that I would say probably in general is I see relationships, I like to put them in three categories. Of course, there's many more than this, but the three categories are relationships that hold us back. There's relationships that stabilize us, and there's relationships that catapult us. And we don't necessarily have to look at any of them as good or bad, but I like to look at these relationships, whether it's a friend or a lover or a spouse, or it could be your child. Is that relationship, is it holding you back from living your life purpose, or is it holding you back from speaking your truth? Some cases the relationships are more stabilizing and they're a stake in the ground. They may not be where you are on your journey. They may not be, accelerated on their spiritual awakening journey, and they don't have to be. They can just be a stabilizer for you. But as long as they're supporting you and who you are and loving and believing in you, I think those stabilizing relationships can be great. They don't always have to be the same, as far as where you're at in your awakening journey or your spirituality. The relationships that I find to be really fun are the ones that are really catapulting, the ones that catapult us to live our best life, and the ones that are there supporting us no matter what it is that we do, and that they're really here to help support our mission and hold our soul like a fragile egg. So I look at those three types of relationships as a way to just say, is this someone that I want to be with, whether it's romantic or not? Is this someone who's really helping me on my soul's journey and my mission? So that's the way that I look at relationships. So to answer the question about how does one know when in a relationship whether to keep pushing through? I think that's such a personal question, and it's not something that I could answer for anyone or would even want to try. But I think if you use those three types of relationships and ask yourself, what is it that I need right now in my life? I think it gives you a lot more grounding as to what you need to do. But with that said, I recognize that relationships are long-term relationships, and I'm not suggesting that we give up on people. I'm not suggesting that either, but I think it's also taking a really close look at where are they as far as how they want to grow and develop. Where are they willing to do their work? And I think a lot of times as more empathic, compassionate people, we oftentimes want to pull people along with us. And I believe that we're here to shine the light and show the way, which is different than pulling people along, especially when someone might be pulling us down, which falls into that category of people who are holding us back. So I think it's also taking a good look at where's the workability of the other person that you're in relationship with. Are they willing to do their work? Because we can't do it for anyone else, right? We're not here to heal anybody. We're only here to heal ourselves and really recognize that we're already perfect and whole. So yeah, so that's a great question. A little bit tough to give a very specific answer for each individual, because I think that's where we need to find it. deeply within ourselves and what it is that we feel is right for us in our journey and where we're at on our journey. So yeah, so hopefully that answers the question coming out of Thailand. So thank you for that question. Anyone else have a question or a comment, something you want clarified from the book?
Yeah, this is so great. I loved your book, and there's so many awesome nuggets, and the combination of spirituality and travel and this relationship question is makes me think, you use relationships to talk about spiritual growth a lot. Are there other ways that you would like to highlight for spiritual growth beyond using relationships to get there?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. As you said, I have a tendency to go a little bit more towards the romantic relationship side to get a lot of my lessons, but certainly we get our lessons from our work environment, right? Our colleagues, what kind of work we're attracting, what kind of work that we're doing. We also get them heavily through children, right? Through other love relationships that aren't romantic. I think family is another big one that a lot of people get. I feel very fortunate. Look, I'm still getting lessons through my family without a doubt. But the thing that I feel the most fortunate about is that I have parents who were, I think, really great people to give me a foundation of trust and to really feel a level of unconditional love that I might not have recognized was as wonderful as it is until I got out into the world and saw how a lot of other people actually don't have some of those really core family unit unconditional love foundation feelings. And so I think family is one of those real tough ones for a lot of people. Yeah, so I would say that, and also health is another big one. A lot of people call in a lot of health challenges, and that is also something that oftentimes gets us to a place where we have to pay attention. We have to take a pause, right? And I think the thing that is so important for all of us is to just really get in tune with ourselves, our body, our mind, our emotions, and to hopefully find those moments to pause before the big pause comes. And what I mean by that is if we don't actually heed the call and we don't listen to spirit and we don't listen to our bodies, that we need to slow down, or maybe we need to eat differently, or maybe we just need more touch, or we need more communion with others. If we don't listen to those soulful callings, we know that we will attract other situations that will put us on our knees to actually listen, which means, different levels of illness, and whether it's something minor or something major, or maybe it's just something that scares us and jolts us and says, oh wow, I really need to just see my life a little bit differently. Hopefully we don't have to get to the place where we're 100% on our knees and just really asking for another way, but sometimes we do that. I've certainly done that in my life, where I've waited until something, really, I had to pay attention and I had to get that particular lesson. So yeah, I think there's a lot of different ways that we can learn our lessons in our lifetime. It's just a matter of how we set them up for ourselves. Anyone else have a question or a thought? All right, let's see. I think I've got another one coming in from Australia. What is a good way, or several ways, to get back in flow when you have been pulled out of it? Well, first of all, I think it's incredible when we realize that we're out of it. Sometimes, again, we know we're out of it because it's so clear, because everything's not functioning. But I think the real trick is to see when we start to get out of flow at the very beginning, and it usually starts with a thought or something from our external environment that triggers us to have a thought. And a lot of times I like to talk about it as the rabbit hole, the power of our minds to create our lives, but it's also the power of our minds to drive us into this circuitous loop of thoughts that takes us deep into this rabbit hole and deep into these storylines that are no longer serving us. So it could be a story that's happening for us, or an external environment thing that's happening for us, where we just find ourselves in a mind mess and we're not able to be in that flow. So how do we get back in flow? we have to get back to the mind. We have to get back to breaking through our mind being in the driver's seat and getting our soul in the driver's seat and our mind in the back seat, the ego mind. And there's lots of different tips, tools, and techniques. I mean, sometimes it's easy. Sometimes we can flip the switch right away and we can get ourselves back on track and get back into the flow. And sometimes we can't, because sometimes we've spent a long time leading up to getting ourselves out of that flow. And so it's really a matter of what works for you. There's a lot of different modalities and tips and tools that I talked about in the book. I also have a lot in the Awakening and Healing Handbook that I think can help get you in and out of the flow. Yeah, so there's lots of tools there. So I don't know if there was any specific one that this person was asking for, but it was mostly just to get back in the flow when you have been pulled out of it. Yeah. So number one, recognize that you're starting to see yourself pull out of it, so that you're not in full throttle out of it. Start mind monitoring. Just, what's going on in my mind? What thoughts are circling? What thoughts do I want to stop? And what thoughts do I need to start? That's a really good way to start seeing where your thoughts are at. Yeah, so I think that would be the real thing I would say in the beginning, not knowing what this individual's situation was or being able to comment a little bit more. But it's always about breaking through your beliefs and getting to the core of what is that core thought that's causing you that trigger, that's getting you into a spin and out of your heart and into your mind, which is why you're thinking these circuitous thoughts that get you out of the flow. Any other thoughts or questions from the live callers we have on the line?
Yeah, I'll jump in with a question. Thank you so much for your book. It was really incredible, and I just learned so much from it. And one question that I have, getting back to kind of the romantic relationships, I think your book kind of, helped me, guide me through some awakenings and some some habits I have that aren't so great in relationships. And I kind of feel like I'm more in tune with those now, but now I'm starting to date again. And, I don't know that I have that trust in myself to not get into those same patterns. So even though I feel like I've done a lot of healing and awakening and a lot of work on myself. So what would you recommend to kind of be, put myself in a place to have more of a positive relationship, or to see those red flags earlier on before I'm too deeply in a relationship? I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you've done a lot of work and you are in your heart space. And I think that one of the first things I would say is, when you meet someone that you think you're romantically interested in, listen to your body. Listen to how you feel. Do you have tightness in your chest? Do you have nervousness? Do you have, what is it that you feel when you approach that person? Because a lot of times what our mind wants to do is evaluate what is in front of us, aspects about them that may not be the real thing that we need to pay attention to, the things that are inside of us that are giving us either the red flags or giving us the green lights. And I think that one of the things is to not be scared about, and I'm not saying you're scared, but to not be scared about attracting another person, because immediately you're going to start to see the mirror, right? That's how it works, is that every relationship comes in for our awakening and our growth and our healing. And so it's that I've seen over time that as we find people that we're attracted to, and the chemistry is super strong, it's almost like the stronger the chemistry, the deeper the wound that will come. So don't be afraid to step into whatever this relationship is bringing you. I like to think, well, thank it, right? So if you're stepping in and the chemistry is strong, just go, oh, okay, there's a strong chemistry here. Let's explore it. And let's not jump to, is this the guy, or is this the girl, or is this the relationship? It's more about saying, oh, let me see what else I've called in to learn for myself. Let's see what this person's going to reflect to me. Let's see what this person triggers in me. Let's see, like, the moments where I don't feel like I'm on the same page with this person, or the moments that I feel that, ooh, that just didn't feel right, or that there's something about that energy. Because what happens to us a lot of times is, wanting that romantic relationship. I mean, you've seen it in my book a million times. We build the fantasy around what we want that relationship to be. And especially women, a lot of times, and men too, but I'm just going to speak to women for a second. There's a lot of times where we're falling in love with men's potential. And we fall in love with the idea of who we think that they are or will be in a relationship, when a lot of times that's not what they're showing us right up front. And we give people a lot of spiritual passes thinking, oh, well, that's just because of this or that or the other. And we don't listen sometimes to that deeper inner knowing. And so I would just suggest you're doing all the right things and being in your heart space, stay in your heart space and try to stay out of the storylines. And when the storylines come in, what I mean by that is the triggers, then you just say, oh, okay, what is this? What do I want to explore? And what is this person here to show me? But also knowing when it might be the right time to leave. And it might be early on. It might be the first date. It might be, the first week. It might be a year. But a lot of times I feel that we often overextend our soul contracts with people. They've come in to teach us something, and it might be that we just have a relationship with them we date them for a month or we date them for a year. We get what we went into it for. We have them as a mirror and we see what they are offering us and we welcome it, and that we do our best to not let the broken hearts stop us from loving and living, because oftentimes that's what happens to us is we get more and more heartbreak and things that don't align, and that can be hard to not bring those into the next relationship. So it's also taking the time, as it sounds like maybe you are, in between the relationships, and really just going deep within of, oh, what did I learn from that one, and what am I wanting to attract in the next one, and then being curious about what it is that comes to you. Does that touch on your question or answer it, or is there anything else that comes up as a result?
No, that's really great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. That's very sage advice. So thank you.
Any other questions from the live callers?
There was something in, again, I spoke before, and again, yes, thank you for your book. It was very, very wonderful and intriguing so often. I definitely couldn't put it down, especially during some of the more exciting parts there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you got into this place where you were went to this place where they were shaking all the time, and you were saying, like, you wouldn't go in there, and you were kind of eye rolling at times, but then all of a sudden you find yourself back there. So what was it that brought you back? Like, what was the benefit of that?
Yeah, so I had heard a lot of people talking about the shaking ashram in Bali, and it was just up the volcano from Ubud, and I just kind of thought, oh, that's just a little bit crazy. But my friend that I had met at the Ayurvedic clinic from Australia kept coming like every 6 months, and she would be at the shaking ashram for like a week, and then we would have dinner immediately after her time at the ashram. And so she would have all these stories about these healings that were happening for her. I mean, like deep healings and release that was happening for her simply by shaking. Now, granted, there's 3 shakes a day, and each shake is 2 hours a piece. So you're shaking for 6 hours a day. So you're pretty shook up, no pun intended. And that just brought curiosity to me. I thought, you know what? I feel like I have participated in almost every spiritual modality, at least that Ubud had to offer. And I thought, I think I got to check this one out. So to answer your question, because I did get there and I was kind of like, oh my God, what are we doing? And my friend was there with me, and we were evaluating, are we like part of a cult? I mean, there was some crazy things that were happening. But the thing that was the most impactful for me was after we left the ashram, and I asked the driver, hey, can you stop by the side of the road? Because there's this beautiful cascading rice field down the volcano and this beautiful sunset. And we got out and we looked at the sunset, and I had this connection to nature, to life, to everyone and everything that I at that point had not experienced. And I had not done psychedelics at that point. I just felt different. I felt in love with this older gentleman who was at the side of the road. Some not romantic love, not chemistry like that love. I just felt in love with this guy. And I was like, wow, this is oneness, this is knowing our brothers and sisters from a heart space, not from a mind space, like, oh, I'm going to evaluate you. You're at the side of the road. You must be this, that, the other. It wasn't that. And so the miraculousness of that feeling in my body, and then realizing that I had actually shook out probably a lot of ideas and beliefs. And yeah, I was like, okay, but I wasn't like ready to jump back in right away. No. And then it just came up again. And I was like, I feel like there's something more to this. I feel that I didn't get the full immersion because I wasn't having the same experience that everybody else was while they were shaking. Because honestly, I was thinking my knees really hurt. And like, I don't think I can physically shake myself anymore. But when I looked at other people, I could see that they weren't shaking themselves. I could see that there was something innately within them, like an energy that they were moving with that was completely blissful. And I wanted to experience that. So I guess it was my curiosity. It was how I felt when I came out. And then it was my curiosity to go back and experience that again. And so each time I went, I had different experiences. And yeah, and each time I went, I was like, oh, it just felt kind of crazy. But then I looked at Lily, my dog, and I was like, how do they overcome trauma? They shake it off. You see a dog or any animal out in the wild, and something traumatic happens to them and they shake it off. And so I was like, there's something to this. And then I know this part wasn't part of your question, but I feel like I want to share it. Fast forward several years, I do my first San Pedro ceremony, which is a cactus. And as I laid there, now like halfway into the journey, I started shaking. Like from the outside, I think people would say, wow, like she's shaking violently. But there was a rhythmic shake to what was happening in my body. And all I felt at the time was that the San Pedro, because I had asked for a super cellular soul scrub. I wanted at a cellular level to just like clean house with any energies or beliefs or anything that wasn't serving me. And so I felt like that's what the San Pedro was doing, was just shaking me. And it was like just this beautiful feeling of shaking. And I remember afterwards thinking, wow, that reminds me back to the shaking ashram, and how when we let spirit drive and we let the energy of spirit flow through our body, our lives can change dramatically. And, we're programmed to be in the mind. I'm super strong in the mind. Even after all the spiritual modalities, I still rely on my mind. So I'm not saying that we don't use our mind. It's just that we need to get our mind in the back seat and get our soul in the driver's seat. And so shaking for me ended up being a modality that I found helpful. And honestly, I do still shake today, not for 2 hours at a time, but when I have something that I feel like I'm really needing to process, or an emotion that I want to like get into a little bit more, I don't want to shove it down, even though that sometimes, the first feeling is, oh, don't cry, don't feel it. I'll get up right here and I start shaking, and Lily barks at me every time. She's like, what are you doing? And because the energy, you're just shaking it out. So as crazy as it may feel or sound or look, there is definitely a lot to moving energy. And I think many of us on this call, I'm sure the listeners are familiar with Kundalini, right? Kundalini yoga, Kundalini energy. And that's really what it is just really starting to shift our energy and shake out the blocks. That's what energy, our healers are helping us with too, just not in a shaking fashion, but let's get to the core of the block and blow it up. So I know that over answers your question, but does it spur any additional thoughts or questions based on what I said?
Well, just like when you decide to shake on your own,
Yeah.
How long do you do it for?
It depends upon what I'm shaking out, to be honest. If it's something that I just feel like I need to shift my energy, I shift my state, then it's a quick little shake. But sometimes it's 10, 15 minutes. I mean, I haven't shook on my own for an hour. I don't think I've done that on my own. There are, Ratu Bagusa's shaking ashram still, he's now passed, but they still do shakes online where you can participate and join with people and shake together. I didn't actually ever participate in those. It didn't resonate for me, but But it probably would have been a way for me to shake a little bit longer, and to just really get in the groove. It's kind of like okay, it's not like meditation, but it's kind of like meditation in the sense of sometimes it's helpful to be on a meditative group, where you're all meditating at the same time. It helps you kind of get into the groove of that technique or that modality. And I think that's also something that could be with shaking, that if you really wanted to use it as an ongoing modality where you just shake, in the morning, because that's really what Ratu was encouraging people to do, is to get up in the morning and shake, and to shake off and to shake out and wake up. It's just a way to bring energy through your body. That's it doesn't actually have to be where your knees are hurting. I think when you realize your knees are hurting, which mine were, then you realize that you are trying to shake yourself, and this is about bringing the energy through. And that's the tool, and that's the practice, and that takes practice. Just like meditation takes practice to quiet the mind, it takes a little bit of practice to actually shake the energy through, because we do have energetic blocks and energy that we hold in places. That's why we go to get a massage. Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or questions that pop up?
Yeah, I have a question about, it's more superficial, but yet not. With all of the goodness, and yes, it was a bit of a roller coaster for you in Bali, how did you end up deciding that really wasn't going to be deep down in your soul, your spiritual location, and that California was?
Well, I don't know that California is either. I mean, I feel like that old phrase, home is where the heart is rings really true for me, and that I could live somewhere and it could be a nightmare. I could live somewhere and it can be blissful and it can feel like my home, or not feel like my home, but it's really about how I want to view it. And so for me, I don't consider myself a vagabond per se, but I have lived several places around the planet. And I've lived places when I felt like those places resonated for me at that time. So right now, California resonates for me at this time. And there may be another time when Bali resonates for me, or Italy resonates for me at a greater level. However, to answer your question, I think more specifically, one of my big drivers of leaving Bali really didn't have anything to do with my spiritual home. It had to do with my parents getting older and my nephews growing up, and recognizing that my relationship with them in physical human form and body was really important to me. And that was hard to do. Although I had, Skype calls with my parents several times a week, I wanted to participate in, the barbecues and the things that come up just because you can jump on a plane and go for the weekend. And so that was really a big pull for me, and knowing that I could always live in Bali later if I wanted to, but now was a time for me to be close to family and to really be a part of people's lives in a physical way, and show up for, my nephew's lacrosse games, and to build that relationship that's hard to do, especially with children online. So so that was the big driver for me to come back to the United States, was purely at that point in my life was my family. It really had less to do with like I guess what I was. Well, that's not true, because what I needed community and family, and I needed to be close to it. So it was still about me and still about my spiritual home in that sense. But it was more about the people than it was the zip code. Does that answer the question, or did I digress?
No. It's great. It's good.
Okay, great. Any other thoughts or questions that come up?
Yeah, I would love to understand. So you talked about, when you're talking about the shaking ashram, and I really love dance as like shaking like to music. I think for me is really super helpful. But I'm curious, you talked about having the soul in the driver's seat versus the mind. And I feel like sometimes I'm able to do that, but on a daily basis, I can become fear-based, or, so what's your recommendation for being very intentional about having your soul in the driver's seat on a day-to-day basis. I would love a recommendation.
It's one word, and it's a word that I resist every year of my life for some reason. And the one word is meditation. And I think because my mind is so strong that I often struggle to sit in meditation. And so, as you know from the book, the flowers really were a big thing for me in the beginning to help me to quiet my mind and to really go to that inner more peaceful place. And I don't think it always has to be where you're just sitting with your legs crossed. I think it's find what helps you connect in and feel at peace and one with the source that you're part of. You know, surfers, I have just a whole different view of surfers. I think that yes, while they're out there to have exercise and be in the water, they're really in a sense of oneness. I think if you talk to any surfers, you know, they find that as a very meditative tool for them because they're really just one with the waves and one with Mother Nature and getting in the flow of the wave. Catching the wave. Yeah, certainly there's probably a lot of other things going on in their minds. And I think a lot of them will also say that they get a lot of downloads during that time. So I'm not saying it's the truest form of meditation. I'm just suggesting that I don't think we always have to be so hard on ourselves that if we don't sit for, 20, 30 minutes in the morning to meditate, that there's other ways that we can bring the practice into our lives. But actually sitting and doing meditation, which is something that I've recently reinstated because I realized that I was a little too far off from really training my mind. And we need to sit and we need to be in that place where we can observe and welcome what comes our way and also let it go and just be in that really peaceful place of connecting to ourselves and finding a way to, yeah, that was a thought. Okay, there's some truth in that. Okay, but I'm going to let that thought go and I'm going to go back into the peace that passes all understanding, that keeps our hearts and minds open. And yes, I agree, because I feel like people are saying, well, but that's so hard. And that's why, yes, I agree. Sometimes that can be really hard, but it's training, it's practice. And it's practice through breath. It's practice through, yoga is another great way to quiet the mind. It's, and yoga isn't just in the yoga studio. We do yoga to be in touch with our breath. We don't do yoga simply to find out how long we can hold a crazy pose. We do yoga to quiet ourselves, to be able to hold the pose longer. And so we can practice that breath work while we're standing in line at the DMV. I always like to use that as an example because for a lot of us at the Department of Motor Vehicles, it's just one of those places you don't want to be. And there's usually a long line and there's usually people you don't necessarily want to be hanging out with for a half a day. And so those are the great places to practice meditation and to practice breathing and to practice yoga and to practice presence and awareness. And sometimes it's just listening to the bird. Sometimes it's just staring out at the horizon and just staying in that peaceful place as opposed to following the mind. And because the mind's always going to tell us a story. It's always going to have something to say. And unfortunately, a lot of times those stories in our minds, it's not our cheerleader that's coming forward. It's usually our worst, best critic. And then we have a choice, are we going to listen to that storyline or are we going to change the storyline and move it into our cheerleader self as opposed to the critic self? So lots of different tips and techniques that we can use to be in that more meditative state. But it's the first thing is just recognizing that you're having the thought that's not taking you into your inner wisdom, that's just spinning you around like a top. So yeah, meditation is a great way to practice.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other comments or thoughts coming forward? I think we have. We have another good question. Okay, so this one's coming from Australia. When up against blocks, facing obstacles on a goal, how does one know when perseverance is required and when to pivot direction? And that again has all to do with tapping into your inner wisdom to know if it's time to stay or it's time to pivot. so specific to each situation. It's a little bit difficult to answer in the sense that I believe it's more about a feeling that you have, and recognizing, am I acting out of fear or am I acting out of love? What feels right. And the hard part about what feels right, at least it is for me, but I think it is for most of humanity, is that when we do something that we feel right about, we don't always have the ammunition, and I don't like that word, but just hear me out. When a loved one comes to us and says, and why did you do that? There's something innately programmed within humanity that it's not always okay to just say, because my heart felt like that was the right thing to do. Of course, there's times when people accept that, but there's a lot of times when people don't accept that, because we're programmed to have thought through it and come up with, why did you pivot? Why did you do this? And then we feel like we have to provide that answer. And sometimes we don't have a logical answer, but it's always about staying in your heart and knowing that you made the best decision with the information that you had at the time. And I think that's the important thing. And then when you realize a little bit later that maybe you shouldn't have or wanted to do something different, don't go down the shoulda, woulda, coulda road. Just make another decision. I mean, I think it's one of the things that I try to practice. I believe I practice, but sometimes it's still hard for me, is to not be so hard on the decisions and call them right or wrong, but just know that there doesn't have to be a wrong decision. Just make another decision. But most importantly, keep going. Because a lot of times we get stuck and we're like, oh, I don't want to make another decision because I'm too scared that it might be the wrong decision. Well, the wrong decision to who? Right? The wrong decision to the outside world, to society, to the external people that are looking in. All that matters is what's the right decision for me, like what's in my heart space. And so that's the place that we're all really aiming to get to. And that's when your soul's in the driver's seat, when you're sitting within that heartfelt space to say, yeah, this is what's right for me. It might not feel like it's right for everybody else, but the old phrase, if mama's not happy, no one's happy. I mean, it's true. And a lot of times mamas have to make themselves happy first, and then everyone else can be having their own reaction to that. But we have to take our own happiness first. And it doesn't mean that we're not caring about other people or caring about how we impact other people, but we do have to be in that heartfelt place, because if we don't tell ourselves the truth and we don't take truthful actions, then it doesn't help anybody else, and nobody else in the end is happy, because it always boomerangs back around us. So yeah. So it's a bit of a tricky one to talk about, but yeah, when you're up against those blocks, facing the obstacles on a goal, what's the why? Why am I doing this? Where's my heart at? Where's my passion? And really sitting with that. And also, I would say another thing that comes to mind that I use a lot is remote writing, where you just get that journal out, ask the question, right? Whether it's your guides, your angels, your higher self, your starseed family, whoever it is that you resonate with to feel like you're asking guidance from, ask them the question, write it down. Just, why do I feel sad? It doesn't even have to be a complicated question. And just let the pen write, right? Just let the pen come to you to say what it is that you need to hear. And that's a great place to find the pivot points. Is it time to pivot? Maybe one last tip I'll give on that comes to mind as I'm speaking is, if it's a really hard decision and I'm just in that analysis paralysis, I'll write it down, and then I put it by my bedside. I ask the question just before I go to sleep. And when I wake up in the morning, the first answer, yes or no, which one comes to mind? Because usually I'll do a yes or no just because that's the easiest, but it doesn't have to be yes or no. And I do it for 5 days in a row. And if you get obviously 3 days that it's all the same answer, then you know what the answer is, and you don't have to go the whole 5 days. But yeah, because then you kind of get the spirit answer as opposed to your ego mind, thinking mind answer. And so that's also a nice way to see if it's the right time to pivot or not. So all right, well, we are down to the hour here. Thank you guys for joining the call today. Unravel your mind. Or transforming relationships to love and life, and breaking through those beliefs to tap into our inner wisdom. I hope you'll join us next time. Subscribe to the YouTube channel at Beth Bell Live and ring the bell, and we will send you all the updates when new episodes are posted. So join us live.